Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you may be. Welcome to Stripping the Dipping. My name's Colin Johnston, and I'm your unusual host for today's episode. Now, I'm not sure why the guys can't make it along this evening. I can only imagine some sort of Wile E. Coyote-style incident has befallen them. But whatever, here I am, drafted in like a Wish.com version of Nico Hulkenberg to fill their racing boots. Anyway, let's get going, shall we? Tonight's guest is a fellow Irishman whose CV runs from the upper house of the Irish Parliament to the right hand of the FIA president, with many interesting steps along the way. I'm keen to find out more, so please join me in welcoming Sean O'Connor. Good evening, Sean.
Hi, Colin. Thanks for having me.
No problem. Great to have you here. And where are you coming to today? Are you at home in Ireland here? Or are you traveling?
I'm calling to from Ireland, and on Friday I'm off to Austin for the Grand Prix.
Ah, fantastic. In your role now as being part of the FIA and various initiatives in the FIA, would you do a lot of traveling to the races?
I do. I do, but I find most of the work, it's actually hard to get work done on races because everybody has, well, certainly the teams and people like that have very limited time. Everything is fleeting. So I think to be productive, it's better to be away from the races is my mantra at the moment.
Before we get into all of that, I suppose we better find out why motorsport. As a fellow Irishman, you know, motorsport's in the soil here, but how and when did motorsport come into your life?
I came into motorsport a different way than most. I actually am very fortunate that I've always been paid to be in motorsport. So in a way, I've been a mercenary from the beginning. I worked in, whereas most people have to pay. So I worked in a public relations agency in Dublin, which had the Marlboro account from Philip Morris cigarettes, who at the time were a very big sponsor in motorsport. And in those early days, Eddie Jordan, how old I am, is Eddie Jordan was a Formula 4 driver in what was called Marlboro Team Ireland. And Eddie Jordan went on to great things, as we all know. And then the guy who was the marketing manager in Ireland for Philip Morris got transferred to the Middle East. And I got a phone call after he went asking if I wanted to go down to the Middle East and start the sponsorship program in the Middle East. So off I went at the tender age of 22 to Kuwait. And for somebody who hadn't traveled much before, I'd only been to the UK before, it was obviously a huge cultural shock. But that's where I met the now president of the FIA, Mohammed bin Sulayem, because I was his sponsor in the early days. And he was what we were starting the motorsport sponsorship in the Middle East, which was rallying. So I then went from single seaters to rallying, where I had a long career in rallying for a long time. And then now I'm back to everything with being his advisor in the FIA.
Fantastic. What sort of period was this? Was this in the 90s or?
No, this was in the early 80s, when there was nothing in the Middle East. And if you think about it, rallying was only starting there. And if you look now, you have obviously Bahrain's had a Grand Prix for a long time. You have Qatar, you have Saudi Arabia, and you have Abu Dhabi. So 4 of the championship. The Gulf has become a really important place for motorsport. I'd like to think that in those early days, I played a role in helping educate the public and the consumers to have an interest in motorsport, and it originated from rallying.
It seemed to be rallying was very strong. I remember Al Hajri coming over from that part of the world to the circuit, and what about 86, maybe something like that there? I think Rothman's money might be brought him over.
And he did the Galway rally, and he did a few. And of course, another fellow Irishman, Ronan Morgan, was Billy Coleman's co-driver, as you probably remember. But he then became the co-driver of Mohammed bin Sulayem. So they went on to win 14 Middle East championships, 11 with Ronan. So
fantastic.
There's always been a kind of Irish connection there as well.
That's very interesting. And unusual in a way, like you've become so strongly associated with motorsport and created so much in motorsport with not having, like so many of us here, sort of that childhood initiation to it.
That's true. I was very lucky. I mean, a lot of people would I suppose, remember me for kind of building motorsport in the early days. And another kind of iconic figure was David Richards. So David Richards was with the Rothmans team, and I was with the Marlboro team. So we kind of grew up together. But I also created an event which was called the Marlboro Desert Challenge, which is now called the Abu Dhabi Desert Challenge, which is the longest part of the cross-country World Championship. It's the longest round of, it's been in the championship for over 20 years. That was something that I actually, speaking of pizza, in a Pizza Hut with the president, with Mohammed bin Salman, we just sat down and I said, why don't we do an off-road rally? And I just did on a napkin, and we wrote it down, and how much would it cost, and it got started. And it's one of the iconic events of that championship, the cross-country World Championship. And the other one, which I was lucky when I finished up with Marlboro, because sponsorship was coming to an end, it was the start of the professionalization of rallying in terms of broadcasting and communication. And actually, speaking of David Richards, he had taken the rights to develop the championship. And I then decided because I'd never finished a degree, I'd done a diploma, and I'd always had this thing. So I went back to do what they call a research master's, but I took the World Rally Championship and the television of the World Rally Championship as the subject, which I got a huge amount of data, and I got to understand the value of research in motorsport, because quite often there isn't a lot, and it's hard for researchers to get information, because motorsport by its nature is quite secretive, and teams and sponsors and people don't want to give information away. So I was lucky that I got the master's. I got good cooperation. I actually forecast that the business model wasn't going to work. David Richards had stopped it, but out of that was the phone call then that the British government and the Irish government were looking at what they call a social cohesion event, was to create a North-South World Rally Championship in Ireland. And again, with my old Middle East colleague, Ronan Morgan, we did a feasibility study, which relied very heavily on that Masters. And we went on to create Rally Ireland, which became the biggest single sporting event that was ever held in Ireland back in 2007.
Fantastic. And you've been involved, it's been such a period of development, because effectively talking about the Rally Raid event that you were involved with, you were starting that really at a time when really the only thing like that was the Dakar. At that stage, there wasn't really a sense that Rally Raid was a thing, a championship organized multi-event thing.
Yeah, it correct. And the way I looked on it is that rallying, if you look at the terrain in the Middle East, it's soft sand and desert. And there's, you had you're bringing these very expensive rally cars from Europe, which have to be imported, and the engineers and everything go. But most people in the Middle East have 4x4 or ATVs, as we call them in America, for going out and driving in the sand. And they drive very well in the sand. That's their natural terrain, whereas tarmac rallying would be natural for people in Ireland. And I said, we really need to create an event that's suited to the local environment and the local people. So it started off as I suppose a regional event to attract local drivers in cars that they built locally rather than importing them. And as they say, the rest is history. It's been a great success.
Fantastic. And again, you're playing to the strengths of the local environment there with the Rally Raid event, playing to the strengths of Irish rallying then when this fantastic World Championship round was created and came to the island of Ireland. I suppose in a sense, a supersized version of our Circuit of Ireland rally for a world market.
It was. And the one thing is, because it was everything was stacked against us in a way, because Ireland is a tiny country, and the conventional wisdom at the time was, it's a small car market, they shouldn't get it. We'd be better off to go to the United States or somewhere where the manufacturers sell a lot of cars. So we deliberately leverage the, shall we say, the history of division. And Max Mosley, who was the president of the FIA at the time, his own family background was quite political, as most of your listeners will probably know, with his father. He immediately saw the political context and the political opportunity for the FIA to get in and be seen to help build the peace through that something that, we talked earlier about rugby. Rugby cannot be held in both. The team might be from the two jurisdictions, but the great thing about about rallying is it can cross borders easily. So it was on the basis of that Mosley backed us for the World Championship against the odds, and then we worked really hard to make sure that it was equal split in terms of value north-south. That's why we started in Belfast at Stormont, which had political significance because it's where the parliament is based. And it was to start there and to finish in Sligo, which also has significance in historically, where the last stage was, where the late Lord Mountbatten was blown up during what we call the Troubles. And it was to finish there with iconic scenery, with live TV to show that all was well on the island of Ireland. And I remember Max Mosley came to it, and he met the late Ian Paisley and Martin McGuinness, and was absolutely fascinated by the whole political dimension of that rally, and was a big supporter of Rally Ireland.
That's a tremendous meeting, Ian Paisley, Max Mosley, and Martin McGuinness. To be a fly on the wall, perhaps, with that.
Well, there's actually a funnier one subsequently that Martin McGuinness came to visit Abu Dhabi, and I was working there because when I finished with Rally Ireland, we went to 2009 was the first Abu Dhabi Grand Prix, which the CEO, I'm starting to sound very Irish about everything, but the CEO of the circuit was a man called Richard Cregan, who had been the team manager in Toyota when they were in Formula One. And he was brought out to be the CEO. And Ronan and I had a good working relationship with him historically. But anyway, Martin McGuinness was invited to the circuit. He was on a visit, a trade visit for Northern Ireland, and Mohammed bin Salman was asked to drive him around the track. And when they were being strapped into the car, he said, Mohammed said to him, "Is this your first time to be in a fast car?" And he said, "No, the last time I was in a fast car, the RUC were shooting at me."
Oh dear, excellent. You couldn't write it, Sean?
No.
Well, of course, people will probably come to understand that actually Ireland runs all motorsport. The more you look at it, whether it's present day, whether it's journalists or administrators or people in positions to pull strings, or historically, I think Ireland runs all motorsport.
Yeah, well, I mean, this is something that actually the most successful country in the world is Finland. If you look at it has a similar population to Ireland, but they've won so many world championships in rallying and in F1, and they have a really good attitude. They have for over 20 years treated motorsport like an Olympic sport. It's been part of the Olympic setup. So if you were a good rally driver or whatever, you got taken into the state system in the same way as a track and field or anybody else. So and also that the Finnish mafia has been very successful in pushing that they always want to have the next generation of a Finn in the business. So I think much as I'd be proud about being Irish, I do take my hat off to the Finns. I think they've done, for a small country, they've done an amazing job.
Indeed. Always a new generation coming through, as you say.
Yeah, and the other thing is that, places like China is hugely underdeveloped in motorsport. I mean, Finland would have more competition licenses. Ireland would have more competition licenses than China and India, not collectively. So that's one of the things we're working on at the moment, is to grow motorsport outside the European kind of heartland where it came from to try and bring it to places like Asia in particular. Africa is still very underdeveloped. So one of the things we said in the election was about doubling motorsport in the world. And that's what we're actively trying to do, to develop, to develop Africa, to develop Asia. Places like Brazil have been quiet for a few years where they need a lift. So, we are in competition with other sports. If you look at cricket, you look at rugby, you look at football, they're all investing in the developing world to try and grow their sport. And motorsport hasn't up until now because life has been comfortable. We've been very comfortable in our little Eurocentric world. So I think there's a big change coming, and in terms of the dynamics and the balance within motorsport.
It's hard to foresee it, of course, but can you envision championships becoming much more regional? It's hard to imagine as we develop and as we spread out world championships, perhaps, and looking to bring people from other regions more fully into them. Could you see, for example, different sort of channels of motorsport like WEC or Formula One having some sort of regional representation or regional championships?
Yeah, I mean, the starting point is that if you're somebody in Tanzania or in Nigeria, and you might be the most talented player or driver in the world, you could be the next world champion, but it's so hard to get out of where you're from. So what we're looking at doing is to create more regional events. We're going to kind of giving it away. It's going to be announced at the end of the year, but we're going to have a big change in karting. We're going to drive down the cost of karting because it's very expensive. You can, it's only the son of a millionaire can really go all the way. So to really bring down the price of karting, to hold regional events in each region. But if somebody's got talent, whether they're male or female, is to fast track them quickly. Because if you're Formula One or you're WRC, it's good for your business to have, an African or an Asian driver, because it drives the TV and media interest in the sport and the team. So yeah, we're really pushing to try and make access better for everybody around the world.
Fantastic. I suppose then the trouble you enter into is then that it becomes a funnel. That is a brilliant initiative and a brilliant way of thinking. But suppose as you move up the ladder, the overall availabilities at the top end of the sport, you need to multiply those to make more seats available for this new talent coming through.
Yeah, you do. And sorry, one of the things I should have said is, if you take, there's only 20 seats available in Formula One. There's less in WRC that are paid seats. So, yes. But there's lots of other jobs in motorsport. And this is one of the other things we're pushing. For example, we've started as an experiment this year, an engineering scholarship with Cranfield in the UK, who have a lot of connections with motorsport. And for me, this is it's 50,000 euros a year, so it's a full scholarship, flights, accommodation, everything is paid. For me, the interview process, because I was involved in the interview panel, was the most rewarding thing, because you had all these unbelievably bright young people from around the world, and there was only one from Europe actually in our shortlist of 5, who were incredibly enthusiastic about motorsport. We're very environmentally conscious, was another thing I noticed, just had great energy, and absolutely on merit. The winner was a girl from Argentina, which is, A, a woman as a motorsport engineer, and B, Argentina isn't where you'd imagine, but she was the clear winner. We're going to continue it and expand it next year, because we want to get more people from, whether it's in the media or engineering or as technicians, from other parts of the world into our sport, because there are jobs there, and it's an interesting career. I mean, I've had a fantastic career in it.
That's a fantastic initiative. And I suppose the FIA is uniquely placed to bring that forward. Of course, we see Formula One teams, etc., having all sorts of different initiatives to bring different people and people from different locations and different backgrounds into the sport. But I imagine the FIA is unique in that it is made up entirely of these national clubs and national associations. So it's purpose built for drilling down into regions and into countries to find the talent there.
Yeah, it is. But I mean, if you're a Red Bull Racing, they want engineer. I mean, they have trouble attracting talent, and they want the brightest and the best as well. So I think by collaborating together, all the teams and ourselves and other stakeholders, I think we can make a difference and open it up. Because I mean, if you look, as I said, it's been over 20 years. We did a study in the election for the FIA presidency. In over 20 years that Formula One has been in the Gulf region, there's not one Gulf national from any of the countries out there who has a job with the Formula One team. Never mind drivers, not even a cook. So, we've got to try and change that and level up the playing field a bit.
Mm-hmm. It's fascinating, and it's been interesting to see. Obviously, this is part of the new broom at the top of the FIA. Initiatives like you're describing here as well, and you have the FIA University as well. And I see there's, from my point of view, something that's particularly interesting to me as well is finally getting stuck into the FIA archives and digitizing them and owning the history, claiming the history. So there's an awful lot happening in very short order since your friend took over as the president.
Well, first of all, I'm glad to hear you say that, because that's one of my little pet projects, and that was one of the things, was to try and preserve the heritage as well. But I mean, the starting point is it was inconceivable 3 years ago that a man called Mohammed, who'd be from the Middle East, could be elected president of the FIA.
Yes.
It has always been a place of mainly European aristocracy. They've all been princes and barons and all this, and it went from France to Germany to the UK to Italy. They kind of bounced it around between old Europe for a long time. So, it's kind of breaking the glass ceiling from the top down. The bosses now from non-traditional motorsport background, and that has helped shake things up a bit. But to go on the archives, I mean, they've been sitting in boxes in Switzerland for years, and we've already lost some stuff through fire in Paris and through rain damage previously. So we've started this now to digitize the whole thing, and it's been really fascinating, because what you discover is, next year the FIA will be 120 years old. There's not many sporting bodies that are that old. In the early days, it was put together for motor racing, but the FIA was advising governments, because they were moving from horses and horse and carts to cars, and they didn't know how to regulate for signage, for speed limits, for how to manage cars. So the FIA was very influential in helping governments in those days. And then even when you look, there's a really rich history. For example, I saw recently the first regulations for electric car racing were passed by the World Council in 1969. Yeah, and it's everybody talks about it now, but we've been there a long time. So I would hope that by the end of next year, that all the archives will be digitized and be available to interested parties like yourself.
Fantastic. Look forward to it, because there's I always come back when it's history and it's records. I guess some people just see bits of paper or data, and at the end of the day, it's stories, and it's people and life stories, and that's how we spread the message of the sport. It's okay crunching the numbers and tweeting facts and figures, but if you can tell stories that people can relate to, it's a useful way of getting people to engage with motorsport and with motoring in a positive way.
Yeah, it is. And it has surprised me, the interest. I've been quite staggered by, first of all, of our member clubs. They all have a rich history, and people like the RAC in the UK or the ACI in Italy, they all have really rich archives. I was a couple of months ago in Prague in the club there, And they have framed on the wall the page from a flip chart where Belest and Max Mosley met together to design the new FIA. And all the, the Senate and the World Council and all these were on the flip chart in their handwriting. So that's something that we're also going to scan and put up in the office in Paris. So yeah, that's exciting. The university is exciting as well, because we've just there's huge knowledge within the FIA. There's unbelievable knowledge, and if you take but the developing world, it's transferring that knowledge, and obviously technology is helping now. So we've just launched a couple of months ago, and we've had 100 people studying at the moment what we call a certificate in motorsport leadership, which is for the clubs around the world. That's through the FIA University. We will launch in about 2 months because governance is a big thing, and like a lot of sporting bodies wouldn't have sport wouldn't be seen necessarily as the model in terms of governance compared to business. We'll have a FIA modern sports governance certificate as well that we'll be launching. And so there's lots more in the pipeline, and hopefully that we can open up not just to the members, but to interesting members of the public who are interested in acquiring knowledge about our sport.
Fantastic. It all seems positive, and it's in a way catching up with the times. The FIA moving forward and sort of embracing the modern age and looking outwards around the world and towards the future.
Yeah, one of the things, for example, just to give an example, obviously sustainability is a massive issue in motorsport. So there's a new tire tender for Formula One has just been, we've gone through the process, but we insisted on putting into it that that we, after Dieselgate, that we just wouldn't accept the tire company's word for it on emissions from tires, which is increasingly it's not all tailpipe. It's less than 1% of Formula One's carbon comes from the exhaust of cars. So that the brakes and the tires, and that part of the process is that the FIA will monitor the emissions of the tires, and we will publish them because it's a safety issue.
Mm-hmm. And again, there's two things left. First of all, I don't think we make enough of a fuss of how efficient the modern Formula One engine is. It's an incredible thing. And I think Formula One itself hasn't told that story well enough, because we could be really wowing the general public much more about these incredibly efficient engines, for want of a better phrase.
Yeah, and that's why if you look,
they're creating.
Yeah, and if you look, that's why we've never had so many manufacturers interested. The General Motors recently, Cadillac with Andretti application, the Audi, Ford back again. And it's about technology that attracts them. It's not the racing, it's the technology.
Yes.
And what they call the power unit that attracts them. So and I do think, by the way, that the Netflix has really helped drive the interest in motorsport globally, particularly in the United States. I know, like, my own daughter now is an avid fan who would never have thought of, would have had no interest before. But like many of that generation, it was Netflix that got her and her friends into the sport.
It's an interesting one, and I'm in a bit of a quandary about the whole Drive to Survive thing. It is a fantastic thing. It's been a phenomenon, and it's been fantastic for the sport. I do wonder how much of that we're rather simply redressing the balance from the fact that the sport, Formula One in particular, has disappeared behind paywalls over the last 15 years. And perhaps, Drive to Survive is doing a good job, but perhaps in some ways it's correcting an ill from the last 20 years.
True. And that's the other thing that in my job, I'm very mindful of. You asked me earlier about going to the races. For the bulk of the world, it's not about Formula One. It's about national rallying or national karting or hill climbs. Yes. That's where, that's where most of motorsport takes place. And they actually are that's much more important to them than the Formula One World Championship. And it's to support those people that's gets me out of bed every day more than Formula One, because that's where the growth is going to be, and that's where the fun is.
Yes, oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And it's getting people out to engage with that and moving away from their screens, be it,
Yeah, yeah,
falling on Twitter, Drive to Survive or whatever, getting out and smelling motorsport. Um,
yeah.
and I
That's the
suppose
other
it's
thing.
how you make that connection, but I suppose it's how you make that leap for somebody who's engaged with it through social media, Formula One, through social media or Drive to Survive. It's how you get them to make that step to be at, wherever, Yas Marina for a national event or Craig Antlet Hill Climb.
Yeah, I mean, that's the other thing. I just to get in before we finish is, talking about social media has been good and bad, and
Mm-hmm.
the president has launched this what we call United Against Online Hate campaign, which is to get
Mm-hmm.
all sporting organizations to work together to research and come up with solutions, which are sports specific, with governments and with the social media companies. And the reason why that happened was there was a FIA steward, funny enough, at Austin last year, who was a Spanish lady. And I don't know if you remember, there was a controversy about an Alonso decision. She got horrendous online abuse. She was threatened with rape. She was threatened with murder online, and we said, these are our referees, the stewards. If our referees feel threatened, then we will have no sport. We've got to make it safer for them, and that's why we went down this road of working together with other federations like FIFA and IOC, FIM and motorbikes, and tennis have come in with this recently to try and make sports safer for the referees and for the drivers, because nobody wants to get this type of abuse. I know Michael Massey, much talked about from Abu Dhabi. I know that his mother was threatened as well in Australia.
Yes.
So you can't have that.
Awful.
Yeah.
No, not at all. Not at all. Although it's fantastic to take a scientific, an analytical approach to it, to ask parties to put their heads together to find a way forward on it. But you would imagine you would require the wisdom of Solomon to come up with a solution to that. Well, can we really get to the point where we stop, someone rather deluded in their basement sending messages if they feel like it?
Yeah. Well, I think we've got to try, because first of all, I think that what the research is showing us a bit is that a lot of people gain these, not skills, but experiment in gaming. So they're gaming with their friends and they say bad words, or they abuse their friends in a friendly way starting off. And that's where they acquire the kind of anonymous, I'm on my keyboard in my sitting room, I can say what I like to the guy or the woman who beat me. So what I think we will be looking at initially is to educate young drivers, karters, and we're going to be much more karting focused going forward. That to get your license and to compete, you've got to have done the course about good sportsmanship. So hopefully we can make a bit of, at least on a driver level, start with them young.
Fantastic. It'd be really interesting to see how that worked, because, as you say, it is much needed, because it's there's been horrific instances as you mentioned, and just for the regular person as well, engaging with social media, there's always that low level of bubbling along of nastiness that you have to sort of tread around as you go about your business.
Yeah, well, it's interesting you say that. One of the things we now have an artificial intelligence supplier who removes the offensive stuff from our website. But what has happened as a result of that is when you take the toxic people out, and they're actually quite few in number, but they're very, I suppose, high volume in terms of their postings. When you take them out, other people then start to go back because they feel it's a nicer place to be without all the toxic comments. So when you take the nasty people out, your numbers go up because other people feel it's a more pleasant environment to be.
Fantastic. Yep. Fingers crossed that all moves forward and has fantastic positive outcomes for all concerned.
Fingers crossed.
You touched on it earlier as well, about growing motorsport and moving forward. I suppose we should perhaps touch on the fact, and you mentioned as well about Cadillac. We should maybe touch on the Andretti thing. That has been an interesting thing to watch, and we have now reached this sort of Andretti's on the bridge between being in Formula One and not being in Formula One.
Yeah.
Is there anything you can say about that, or is
I have to be very cautious about what I've
I would
said.
imagine. I would imagine.
But I would say that the process that we did to evaluate all the teams was really rigorous. It was months and months and months of very dedicated engineers and lawyers and accountants and all kinds of people going through the process. So it was very, very rigorous. And Andretti were the only ones who passed, ticked all the boxes. It's now over to FOM, Formula One Management. And we would be in constant communication and dialogue with them, because ultimately the decision was taken to open the expression of interest because there can be 12 teams in Formula One. There's only 10 at the moment. The FIA's position has been, in an ideal world, we'd like a team from the United States and a team from China, if we could, as the 11th and 12th, not necessarily in that order. But the General Motors and Cadillac and Andretti will be good for motorsport. We should be throwing rose petals in front of them to come into our sport.
Indeed. Yes, undoubtedly. And you'd imagine in years gone past, that would have been the case. That
yeah, indeed.
But it's rather paradoxical nowadays that there's potentially a new engine supplier, and never mind a constructor, and with the heritage that Andretti has as well. People in the past would have been falling over themselves to have them in the sport.
Yeah, and it is rather curious, and especially when motorsport in the United States is absolute, especially Formula One, with Vegas, and coming on board now. I mean, the interest is at an all-time high, and hopefully it all works out well. Obviously, I'll be hearing more when I go to Austin this weekend, and it's certainly taken up a lot of my time over the last few months.
I'm sure it has. Growth then, America seems to be on the rise for various reasons: Drive to Survive, Andretti, etc., etc. What about the like of China? What about the like of India? In terms of the top end of the sport, can you see any moves from those regions towards being involved in the top end of motorsport?
Yeah, I do. I think that first of all, I think COVID kind of stopped everything, and the world is still resetting from COVID. Mm-hmm. I think all things electric are of interest to Chinese. I mean, look what's happening in Europe now with the Chinese manufacturers. I mean, I drove recently what was the biggest Volkswagen dealer in South Dublin is now BYD. I never heard of BYD 2 years ago. So
crazy. Yeah.
I think that the Chinese interest in batteries and electric, even for example, take rallycross. Mm-hmm. I think that I can see that developing in that part of the world, which is based on their business needs and what they want to do as a society, and their sponsors and manufacturers. So I think I can see a bright future for China, but I think it's going to be electric. Mm-hmm. I think that India is like a sleeping giant because there's so much technology. It's a technology hub. A lot of our, for example, applicants for this year's for the motorsport engineering are coming from India. We've Formula E been there as well, which was successful last year. And the club in India is making a lot of efforts through karting to let people arrive and drive, so that you don't have to buy your own car to arrive and drive, or to just auto test with their own cars and at least get them in. That way.
Brilliant. It's amazing because auto testing and rallycross, albeit electric, they're things that were the gateway drug for so many of us in Western Europe, maybe 30 or 40 years ago. So it's interesting to see with perhaps new technology involved, but effectively the same way of engaging young people with racing cars.
Yeah. And that's the other thing is, we are in competition. Our sport, which we were always very happy in our ivory tower that we were protected, and we'd, lots of money coming in from Formula One and things like this. But other sports are really actively growing. Rugby is an example. Look, the Rugby World Cup is on at the moment, that's only been professional for 20 odd years. And I mean, look at the success they've had in growing their sport in places like Brazil and Portugal and, new markets. And we need to do the same.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, undoubtedly. So looking at new markets, and we were speaking before about Rally Ireland, the great success it was. It's just come to mind. I wonder, do you have any thoughts? Again, now perhaps you're involved with the FIA, you maybe can't say too much, but there is talk of the World Rally Championship returning to Ireland in some shape, form, or fashion.
There is.
Is it something? Is it something you can foresee happening for real and being a success?
Yeah, I think it's there's no problem technically in Ireland putting on a rally because we have the skills and we have the knowledge and we have the expertise. It's how does that work for for the people who pay for it? So it's got to deliver value for whoever, and it has to be a government who are going to invest in it. And I think that another small country, Croatia, has successfully. Estonia are now in WRC and delivering. So I don't see why Ireland couldn't come back, because particularly with the vacuum where there's no event in the UK, which is a shame.
It is. You speak about the value in rallying, and I suppose now, and again, it comes back to your research as well. I would imagine that a lot of the value in rallying now is how you can present it through television and other media as well. So I suppose in that regard, somewhere like Ireland, which has great stages, is particularly picturesque, and a lot of people would have an affection for, perhaps. I suppose they would all be positives if you were looking at hosting an international event.
Yeah, it definitely. And if you look, when we went first in the World Rally Championship in 2007, even though it was our first time to be in the World Championship, we had the second highest TV rating in the whole championship, which I think was 14 rounds. And that was very deliberate, that we worked on TV, global TV. I think it was 64 countries that showed it. And by going live, having live stages. And that's where we delivered the value. And that's the kind of thing we must continue to do if Ireland is to host a round.
Fantastic. Well, fingers crossed, because international motorsport belongs in Ireland. It has for its last 120 years. So every time we can bring the world to Ireland to race cars and bikes, is a good thing.
Well, the other interesting thing was recently, because the Gordon Bennett races, I'm sure you're familiar with it, is part of our heritage. But I was in the Automobile Club of France, which is next door to the FIA office in Paris there. And they actually have the Gordon Bennett trophy because they won the last Gordon Bennett race. So it's actually in their boardroom there. So for me, it was quite nostalgic to actually go and see that. It was real rather than,
Fantastic. Yeah, I've been chasing it over this last couple of years, and but it's wonderful to go down there and visit the circuit when you know a wee bit of history. It's wonderful to go down there to Kildare and trace the route and see the roads. And roads rather like they were back in the day. Still, it's very easy to imagine the great racers of 120 years ago down there.
Yeah, and that goes back to the thing about the heritage. We have a very proud heritage. We have contributed to the development of an industry, which is, somebody said to me recently, 10% of global GDP is around the automobile. If you look at, most child's, one of their first toys, apart from a teddy, is later on is a car. So, and there's great changes going on in the mobility side of the world, and we have to be part of it, and we have to be relevant.
Indeed, yep, and that's why I think we need to, as you guys do, keep spreading a positive message about personal mobility and the car, because as you say, we're entering a period where ownership models will change and the vehicles will change and restrictions will be put upon individuals using their vehicles. And I think we need to fight the corner for that, not only for our personal mobility, but for but as you say, GDP, but also the joy that personal mobility brings to so many people.
It does, yeah, exactly, yeah, and we're very focused, and that's the good thing, because where the complementary side of the FIA is, we have the motorsport side, but we have what we call the mobility. And these are the people who, the likes of the AA or ADAC in Germany, who service the motorist and are very connected with the motorist and know what motorists need.
Mm. Yep. It's great to see that almost 120 years on from the formation of the FIA, that the individual motorist is still so strongly represented and considered within the offices in Paris.
Oh yeah, very. It's very much, we are a member-focused organization, and we're there to service the members, and that's what we do, and we're trying to do it in a different, modern. We've undergone huge changes structurally in terms of the organization of, recruited lots of new people completely. It's much more on a corporate model now, much more, research, evidence-based, using modern management techniques. So I think hopefully within a year or two, the changes will benefit, start to go down the line.
Fantastic. And what does the future hold for you? You're busy within the FIA now. Is that your sort of medium term future, doing things in and around the presidency and the new operations in the FIA?
Yeah, I mean, I was the campaign manager in the presidential election, so that brought me great kind of joy that, against the odds, as I said earlier, a guy called Mohammed could become the president of a very European institution, and a global sports body that would be on parallel with the FIFAs and the IOCs. So that gave me was very rewarding for me to be part of that and to be part of that change. We've got 2 more years to go in this presidency, so I'm not looking much beyond that, but I want to kind of do what we said we'd do in terms of the change. One of those big things is to make karting more accessible and make motorsport more accessible. So hopefully we've cracked that one, and we launch that at the end of the year to make us more knowledge based. That's where the FIA University is coming in, to be investing in research and to be part of the solutions in terms of climate as well, in terms of sustainable fuels and new technologies. Motorsport is a great testing place, and to deliver on a local level to get motorsport strong in every single country in the world.
Mm-hmm. Fantastic. A great aim, and certainly you've got off to a fine start for it. More power to your collective elbows.
Yes, thank you.
I suppose as we move towards the finish, couple of wee questions that Georgie always asks folks. So I will ask you the first of our questions that everybody gets. It's a taxi dinner dishes question. Now, it's a scenario where you're going out to dinner and you have to pick one racing driver to be the taxi driver to drive you to dinner. The second racing driver would be your dinner guest, whose company you would enjoy, and a third racing driver who you would banish to the kitchen to wash up afterwards. What do you think? Who would be your choices?
Well, first of all, I'd never take a driver as the driver. I'd always take a co-driver. They're much safer. So I would take somebody like Juha Pirinen, who was Juha Kankkinen's co-driver, as my as my driver. The second question was what?
Who would be your dinner guest? Who would you enjoy having dinner with and having a bit of crack with?
I have to say that Mohammed bin Sulayem is a really fascinating, funny, entertaining person. So even though he's the boss of the FIA at the moment, I'll say Mohammed bin Sulayem.
Very good, very good. And dare you say, who would you banish to the kitchen to wash up afterwards?
Who would I banish to put in the kitchen? My God, that's a really hard question. Probably a lot of the journalists who gave me a hard time over the year. I don't know about the drivers. Well, I won't give his name, but I was once at a rally in Turkey, and I was with a team who had sold a car to a Turkish driver, and his car broke down. And when we came to the service point, he came with a gun to the other car and said, if I'm not going to finish this rally, you're not going to finish the rally. So, and he get out of the car. So the other guys had to get out and didn't finish the rally. So he would be the guy I would definitely put in the
We've perhaps found the only person in motorsport worse than those who comment on the bottom half of the internet.
Colin, it's been a pleasure talking to you, and thank you.
No problem at all. Lovely to speak to you, Sean. All the best.
Bye-bye.